The sound of the bells marked the end of class, and the technical school courtyard was filled with voices, hurried footsteps, and interrupted dreams. She was walking slowly, looking at the ground, when she saw a fellow student in a wheelchair struggling to pick up the books that had fallen. Most of them just looked away, as if they were protecting themselves from a mirror of their own omission. But not her. She stopped, bent down, and began to pick up the notebooks with the care of someone touching something sacred. Each page was lifted as if it held hope, and the smile she gave her friend was warmer than any morning. The sound of the motorcycle tore through the air. He arrived like thunder on a clear day. New helmet, engine roaring, eyes full of vanity. He stopped in the center of the courtyard as if he were imposing his territory. His friends gathered around him, and everything about him said power. While she was still helping her friend, he stood up with the books in his arms. His shoulder accidentally touched the motorcycle's rearview mirror. The helmet fell to the ground. A metallic sound. Everyone looked. Laughter began to form even before the word. "Don't you have eyes, girl?" His voice cut like a razor. She turned around, startled, trying to explain herself. "I'm sorry. I didn't see." But he didn't hear her. His anger didn't need a reason. It just needed an audience. The slap came fast, brutal, and sharp. His palm found the side of her face, as if he wanted to leave a mark on her inside. And he succeeded. The laughter stopped. Silence filled the courtyard like a thick cloud. No one said anything. No one intervened. The world became a spectator of a cruel act, and she, a forced actress in a play without justice. She put her hand to her face, but she didn't cry. She stood there, feeling something bigger than the physical pain breaking. Her trust in others, the feeling of being protected in a public space, the idea that right would win. All of that fell along with that helmet. He turned his back, satisfied. His friends didn't know where to look. She, however, remained there, uplifted on the outside, broken on the inside. The slap wasn't just on her face. It was on her soul. And although no one knew it yet, that pain would be a seed. The next day, there was no welcome. There were no questions, just an official notification. She was suspended. The allegation was inappropriate behavior during recess. No mention of the slap. No record of what actually happened. He, in turn, continued on as if nothing had happened. He arrived, smiled, greeted his colleague. His motorcycle gleamed in the sun, as if celebrating a dirty victory. The courtyard, where everything had happened, now seemed complicit, full of eyes that saw and mouths that remained silent. In the hallways, whispers followed her like shadows, muffled laughter, sidelong glances. It was just a slap, some said. She must have provoked it, others murmured. The weight was not only on her face, which was still burning, but in the way each silence around her confirmed an invisible sentence. The school that was supposed to teach her decided to forget. The teachers remained neutral, and her classmates, who had previously exchanged confidences, now avoided her as if the pain were contagious. At home, her hope of refuge was dashed when she heard her mother repeat the old warning. Don't mess with an angry man. Sometimes it's better to swallow your pride. She didn't answer. She went to her room, locked the door, and there the silence was crueler than all the words spoken that day. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw more than a bruise. She saw the reflection of a girl who no longer knew where she fit in the world. She felt that the slap had become the norm, and that her truth, small, had been buried under the version of a popular and untouchable boy. The following days were long. The suspension lasted only 3 days, but the moral exile seemed eternal. When she returned to school, no one saw her as before. The chair where she sat remained empty for weeks, even when she was there. It was as if her presence reminded everyone of a collective failure. She began to walk around looking at the floor. Her voice became lower. Her dreams became more distant, and the shame now lived inside her. She had turned her face away so as not to prolong the conflict, but the whole world decided to turn its face away from her. And when everything around her began to pretend she didn't exist, that was when she began to exist for herself. The years passed like warm water running through your fingers. Warm, because they didn't hurt like they used to, but they didn't warm you either. She left technical school as soon as she had completed the bare minimum. No one said goodbye. No one looked for her afterward. It was as if her story had been erased from the memory of that place, except for her own. She carried the episode like a stone in her pocket. Sometimes she forgot, but when she remembered, it weighed heavily. She worked wherever she could, as a receptionist in small clinics, as a cashier in a local store, always smiling slightly, but with her body tense, as if she were waiting for the next injustice. She avoided mirrors, not out of vanity, but because they reflected an image she no longer recognized. A woman who had dreams but spoke little about them, who prepared for interviews, but got stuck when it came to saying, "I deserve it." The words choked, as if the slap still echoed in her throat. She dreamed of being a manager. She had ideas to improve spaces, to value women, to bring dignity to children. She made plans in old notebooks, drafts of projects that never left the drawer. Each job interview became an invisible battlefield, she against her own doubts. She always left feeling that she could have shown more, that it wasn't enough, that something was missing that she couldn't name. One rainy night, after yet another refusal, she sat on the edge of her bed and stared at her reflection in the wet window. The streetlight outlined her outline sadly. She ran her hand over her face, as if trying to erase the past. But there it was, the same face she had when she was a girl, only more tired, and yet still whole. She tried to smile to herself. She couldn't, but she stayed there looking as if to say, if no one believes me, I'll have to learn. She didn't know it yet, but this learning would come not by chance, but by courage. And even without total faith, even stumbling over her own silences, she kept trying. It was one morning, when fatigue seemed to have finally overcome her, that she forgot her notebook on the chair in the cafeteria. She was exhausted from her long shift at the clinic and hadn't realized that, when she put away her lunchbox, she had left behind that worn-out notebook with its torn cover and timid writing. It was where she wrote down her daydreams, business ideas, desires to change the reality of girls like she had been. Words full of desire, but always written in the dark, as if they couldn't exist in the light of day. The person who found the notebook was Donna Clara, the oldest cleaning lady in the building, a woman with slow steps and deep-set eyes who always said, "God sees more than the boss." When she saw her name on the cover, she went up to reception and handed her the notebook with a gentle smile. But before leaving, she stopped, touched her arm, and said firmly, "Girl, your ideas are seeds. He who waters reaps." That phrase hung in the air, stronger than any compliment she had ever heard in her life. That night, she opened the notebook as if it were a holy book. She read her own writings quietly, and for the first time, she believed that there was value in them. They were not just notes. They were maps, sketches of possible worlds. She felt a pang of shame for never having taken them seriously. But along with the shame came a spark of faith, small but warm. He spoke to Donna Clara again in the following days. He discovered that the woman had been a teacher before losing her husband and abandoning everything. That she took care of the cleaning not because she no longer knew how to teach, but because, according to her, she has wisdom even in the broom. Together, they began to talk about purpose, about starting over, about the power of not giving up even when the world seems blind. It was there, among the floor cloths and shelved ideas, that something new was born. Not yet a project, not yet a concrete action, but a serene certainty she was not alone, and her story was not over yet. Her cell phone was old, the screen cracked, and the audio sometimes failed, but it was with it that she began the online course. Every night, after work, she would sit in the corner of the room, torn between the dim light of the hallway and the hope of learning something that would take her out of her head. The world outside was still noisy, but she immersed herself in the classes, like someone immersed in clear water after crossing a desert. Her tired eyes gained a new shine. It was studying, but it was also faith. Faith that her mind could take her further than her pain allowed. She created a project, small, simple, but born from a heart. A digital space where young women could share stories, exchange ideas, and find support without judgment. She used what she learned in the course to structure her goals, map out possibilities, and understand what was needed to transform ideas into impact. With each message she received, she was moved. "Thank you for this," many would say. And she, silently, thanked them too, because she felt that she was finally watering those seeds. The days were still hard. There were still overdue bills, fatigue, uncertainty. But there was also something new, purpose. And purpose is what sustains you when everything else threatens to collapse. She started sleeping later but dreaming earlier. She reviewed content during lunch, wrote plans on the bus, recorded videos with a shaky but truthful voice. Women started sharing her page. Her reach grew. Someone nominated her for a local interview, and after that, more looks came, more invitations, more questions. Who is she? They were finally asking. There were no spotlights. There was no sponsorship. But there was something greater, transformation, and no one could deny that anymore. Everything that they had once told her she would never be was beginning to be disproved, and not out of revenge, but out of choice, because when you plant the truth night after night, one day the light will come. The email arrived on a Monday morning. The subject line was straightforward: invitation to lead new social impact division. She thought it was a mistake. She checked the sender and reread each line. It was real. A large company known for supporting projects by female entrepreneurs wanted to hear from her. Her heart raced, but along with it came fear. Fear of not being ready. Fear of not deserving. Fear of being seen too much. After a lifetime of trying to be invisible, she spent the day in silence. She thought about refusing. She thought about saying that it wasn't time yet, that someone with more experience, more voice, more status would do it better. But that night, Donna Clara showed up, as she always did, to clean the clinic hallway. When she heard about the invitation, she didn't hesitate. Go. It's not the company that's calling you. It's destiny. And when it calls, we obey. She just nodded. Deep down, she knew the time had come to enter the room. On the day of a meeting, she put on a neutral outfit, tied her hair back, and took a deep breath. As she entered the building, something made her stop. A familiar face sitting at the reception desk. Him, the same one, older, without the arrogance of before, wearing a simple uniform, an ordinary employee. The shock was instantaneous. Her hands sweated. Her stomach churned. She thought about going back, about disappearing. But his eyes saw her and lowered. She walked on without saying a word. The past seemed to scream inside her, but on the outside, she was only silence. A heavy, dense, but serene silence. She went up to the top floor, was received with respect, and for the first time sat at the table where decisions are made. She looked around. No one there knew her story, but she knew, and that was enough. The invitation she almost refused was, in fact, the beginning of everything she had hoped for. The position was not symbolic. It was real, strategic, visible. Weekly meetings, decisions with a direct impact, and teams that looked to her as a reference. At first, she still felt the weight of doubt. But as soon as she started talking, the room would go silent. Her ideas, now mature, touched on points that others ignored. She did not use force. She used listening. She led with gentle firmness, like someone who already knows the pain of not being heard. It was on a Friday afternoon that he entered the meeting room, accompanying the technical support team. He sat in the corner without looking up. The same face, the same hand, but now without a voice, without laughter, without arrogance. When she began to present a new project for training young women in vulnerable situations, she noticed a slight tremor in his eyes, and he continued, without hesitation. She didn't expose him. She didn't mention the past. She didn't change her tone. She was just who she was, whole, strong, clear. The silence between them said more than any argument. He lowered his eyes when she showed him the slides. He moved his hands restlessly. He tried to speak once, but his voice failed, and she just listened with the same serenity of someone who, one day, was silenced in front of everyone. At the end of the meeting, he thanked everyone with a brief smile. He looked at her for a second. There was no anger in his eyes. There was something more mature, maybe pity, maybe distant, maybe just justice. The kind of justice that doesn't shout, that doesn't demand, but that remains. The team left the room, discussing the proposals. He was last. He walked past her slowly. He murmured, "Good job," and she just nodded without looking away. In that moment, without words, she won. The invitation came in a symbolic way. The technical school where it all began, now under new management, was planning to renovate its main building and decided to gather former students for a new beginning ceremony. When she saw the name of the institution, she hesitated. The memory still lived there, not in the walls, but in the wounds. She thought about refusing. But something inside her, an old thread of courage, whispered, "Go!" It's time to close the cycle. She chose what to wear carefully. At the back of her closet, she found the light, mustard-colored dress she had been wearing on the day of the slap. Surprisingly, it still fit. Not like before, now it embraced another body, another woman. She was no longer the girl who bowed down to fear. She was a woman who had learned to stand up without making a sound. She put on the piece as if she were wearing history. And she did. When she arrived, she felt the ground shake beneath her feet. The courtyard remained, but the walls had changed. Where there had once been signs of neglect, there were now murals of art, phrases about respect and women's voices. It was a different time. But the space still carried the same energy as before, the one she knew well. He was there, among the guests, dressed simply discreetly. When he saw her, he stood still, and she walked slowly, unhurriedly, with the firmness of someone who carries within herself a justice that does not need to be announced. She passed by him. He looked at her, hesitated, and then said, "You look beautiful." His voice was low, broken. He stammered. He looked for her eyes. She just smiled softly, a smile that held everything, pain, forgiveness, and distance. And she answered, soft as a breeze, "It's the same dress." He didn't know what to say. He just nodded, and she went on, without needing revenge, without carrying the pain anymore. At that moment, the past stopped being a prison. It became a bridge, and she finally crossed. The auditorium was full. It was the company's annual event, where leaders presented results and new projects. She would go up on stage to close the ceremony, a role that few dreamed of occupying, but which she had earned with sweat, dedication, and eloquent silence. She wore a sober, elegant outfit, and her hair tied up simply. Backstage, she took a deep breath. Inside, she still felt the echoes of all the time she had been doubted. But now, she was the one setting the pace. When her name was announced, the applause began even before her footsteps echoed. She walked to the center, waved discreetly. She took the microphone. She didn't use slides. She didn't show graphs. She just spoke. She talked about the project with girls who had suffered silent violence. She talked about how words can hurt more than gestures, and how emotional justice begins when a woman sees herself and recognizes herself despite everything. There, at the back of the room, he was alone, slouched in the seat in the last row, but attentive. When she finished her speech, the silence was intense. And then he stood up and applauded, once, twice, 3 times, then louder, until others followed suit. The sound filled the entire room, but she only heard that first applause, coming from the very person who had once tried to silence her. She looked up at the sky, her eyes moist but firm. She wasn't crying out of sadness. She was crying because she finally understood that the slap she received had pushed her upward, that the fall had been a step, that the pain had been fertilizer, and that, even without knowing it, he had paved the way for the woman she needed to become. He smiled. He thanked her, and he stepped down from the stage. His heart was light. The cycle was complete, and he had a deep certainty in his chest. No one destroys those who blossom from within.